Christmas morning, 1826. The sun rises over the Hudson River, casting a cold, gray light onto the stone edifices of the United States Military Academy. Usually this is a time of rigid discipline, of bugle calls and marching formations. But on this specific morning, West Point looks more like a battlefield than a school. In the North Barracks, the scene is one of total devastation. Window sashes are smashed to splinters. Banisters are torn from the stairwells. Furniture has been reduced to kindling. The smell of stale alcohol, gunpowder, and sickness hangs heavy in the freezing air. And amidst the wreckage, some of the nation's brightest young men, the future leaders of the American Army, are waking up to the worst hangover in military history. This was not a foreign invasion. This was not a training exercise gone wrong. This was the result of a party. A party that involved nearly a third of the student body, smuggled whiskey, drawn swords, and a violent uprising against authority. History knows it as the Eggnog Riot. It is perhaps the most bizarre and arguably the most embarrassing chapter in the history of West Point. It is a story of strict rules colliding with youthful rebellion, of a future Confederate president fleeing a crime scene, and of how a simple holiday tradition turned into a drunken mutiny. To understand how things got this bad, we first have to understand the West Point of 1826 and the man who was trying to tame it. In the 1820s, the United States Military Academy was still finding its footing. It was a small, isolated institution perched on the cliffs above the Hudson River in New York. The man in charge was Superintendent Sylvanus Thayer. Thayer is known today as the father of the military academy. He was a brilliant administrator who transformed West Point from a disorganized school into a premier engineering college. But he achieved this through iron-fisted discipline. Thayer believed that to build an officer, you first had to break the boy. He implemented a system of conduct that controlled every waking moment of a cadet's life. He prohibited tobacco. He prohibited cooking in rooms. He prohibited card playing. But most of all, Sylvanus Thayer despised alcohol. In the early years of the academy, drinking was somewhat tolerated, but Thayer viewed it as the enemy of discipline. By 1826, the possession of alcohol was a dismissible offense. If you were caught with a bottle, you were expelled. Simple as that. However, Thayer had a problem. West Point was isolated, but it wasn't a prison. And just a few miles away, accessible by a dark trek through the woods or a boat ride across the river, was a tavern run by a man named Benny Havens. Benny Havens was a legend to the cadets. He was the anti-Thayer. His tavern was a sanctuary where cadets could escape the rigid hierarchy, smoke pipes, eat good food, and drink flip, a potent mixture of beer, rum, and sugar. Thayer had declared Benny Havens' tavern off-limits, threatening expulsion for anyone caught there. Naturally, this only made the tavern more popular. As Christmas 1826 approached, the mood in the North Barracks was restless. In previous years, the academy had allowed a small celebration on Christmas. The cadets were permitted a holiday meal, and crucially, alcohol was tolerated for the traditional eggnog. But this year, Thayer had tightened the screws. He announced that alcohol would be strictly banned from the Christmas festivities. There would be no wine, no beer, and certainly no whiskey in the eggnog. For the cadets, this was an insult. A Christmas without spiked eggnog wasn't a Christmas at all. It was just another Tuesday. A group of cadets decided to take matters into their own hands. If Thayer wouldn't give them whiskey, they would smuggle it in themselves. The ringleaders were not the troublemakers you might expect. They included high-ranking cadets and men from prominent families. The plan was simple but risky. They pooled their money and arranged a smuggling run to Benny Havens' tavern and other local suppliers. On the nights of December 22nd and 23rd, select cadets snuck out of the barracks. They crossed the Hudson River in the dead of night to purchase gallons of whiskey and rum. Returning to the academy was the dangerous part. They had to bypass the sentries, guards who were also cadets. In some cases, the smugglers bribed the sentries. In others, the sentries were simply in on the plot and looked the other way. By Christmas Eve, gallons of liquor were successfully hidden inside the North Barracks. The ingredients were assembled: eggs, milk, nutmeg, and enough high-proof alcohol to sedate a horse. Christmas Eve night, 1826. Taps was played, signaling lights out. The officers went to their quarters, believing the cadets were asleep. But in room number 5 of the North Barracks, the party was just getting started. The cadets began mixing the eggnog. It wasn't done in a single large bowl, but in wash basins and buckets distributed across several rooms to avoid detection. The cadets moved between rooms, filling their cups, toasting the holiday, and toasting their cleverness in outwitting Superintendent Thayer. Among the revelers was a young, lanky cadet from Mississippi named Jefferson Davis. Yes, the man who would arguably become the most famous traitor in American history was there, drinking whiskey in a dorm room. At this point in his life, Davis was known for being a bit reckless, racking up demerits for minor infractions. That night, he was just one of the boys. By midnight, the party had grown. It wasn't just a few friends anymore. Cadets from other floors were sneaking in. The noise level began to rise. Singing broke out. The stomping of boots on wooden floors echoed through the stone building. The officers on duty that night were Captain Ethan Allen Hitchcock and Lieutenant William Thornton. They were sleeping in the same building, just down the hall. Thayer had stationed them there specifically to keep order. Around 4:00 a.m. on Christmas morning, Captain Hitchcock was awoken by the sound of a flute and rowdy singing. He realized the silence of the night had been broken. He put on his uniform and stepped into the hallway. Captain Hitchcock went to the source of the noise, room number 5. He knocked on the door. The singing stopped, but the shuffling of feet was frantic. When he entered, he found a room full of cadets, some pretending to sleep, others trying to hide bottles under blankets. Hitchcock was a stern man. He ordered the cadets to open their trunks. He found the liquor. He ordered them to disperse and return to their own rooms. Now, in a normal situation, this would be the end of it. The cadets would scatter, accept their punishment the next day, and that would be that. But these cadets were not in a normal state of mind. They were heavily intoxicated, emboldened by the group dynamic, and resentful of the intrusion into their holiday. As Hitchcock left the room to investigate noise on another floor, the mood in the hallway shifted from fear to aggression. Hitchcock encountered Jefferson Davis in another room. The future Confederate president reportedly shouted, "Put away that grog, boys." Captain Hitchcock is coming. When Hitchcock entered, he ordered Davis back to his quarters. Davis, perhaps realizing he was in deep trouble, actually complied. He went to his room and fell asleep. This decision likely saved his military career. He missed the violence that was about to explode. While Davis slept, the situation spiraled out of control. Rumors began to fly among the drunken cadets that the officers were arresting their friends. A mob mentality took over. Someone shouted, "Get your dirks." Cadets began arming themselves. They grabbed their dress swords, bayonets, and pistols. They spilled out into the hallways of the North Barracks. When Captain Hitchcock attempted to restore order on the upper floor, he was met not by sheepish students, but by a violent mob. A cadet named Walter Guion drew a pistol and aimed it at Hitchcock's chest. Another cadet managed to jostle Guion's arm just as he pulled the trigger. The gun fired, the bullet burying itself in the doorframe inches from the captain's head. This was no longer a party violation. This was attempted murder. Hitchcock retreated, realizing he was outnumbered and that the cadets were armed and dangerous. The riot spread to the South Barracks. Cadets began tearing wood from the building itself, banisters, window frames, anything they could grab. They smashed windows, throwing crockery and furniture out onto the parade ground. They threatened to kill the officers. One group of cadets, completely out of their minds, decided they needed more firepower. They ran to the artillery park, intending to drag a cannon back to the barracks and fire it down the hallway to clear out the officers. Fortunately, they were too drunk to effectively move the heavy ordnance before cooler heads, or perhaps just exhaustion, intervened. Lieutenant Thornton, the other officer on duty, tried to intervene and was attacked with a sword, receiving a blow to the head. He was knocked unconscious. For several hours, the North Barracks was a war zone. The bombardiers, as the ringleaders called themselves, ruled the halls. It was pure chaos. As the sun rose on Christmas morning, the adrenaline and the alcohol began to wear off. The cadets looked around at the destruction. The North Barracks was wrecked. Staircases were broken, windows were gone, and the floor was sticky with eggnog and blood. But worse than the physical damage was the realization of what they had done. They had assaulted superior officers. They had fired weapons. This was mutiny. Under military law, the penalty for mutiny was death. Superintendent Thayer was awoken and informed of the situation. He was furious, but he was also cold and calculating. He didn't storm in screaming. He waited. At Reveille, the bugle sounded. Many cadets didn't show up. They were too hungover or too terrified. Those who did assemble were a ragged bunch. Thayer ordered an immediate inquiry. He didn't just want to punish the cadets. He wanted to root out the culture of insubordination. He suspended all regular classes. West Point became a courtroom. The investigation revealed that 70 cadets, 1/3 of the entire school, had been involved in the riot. Thayer was in a difficult position. If he expelled 1/3 of the Corps, the academy might collapse. He needed to identify the ringleaders, the ones who had incited the violence, while showing mercy to those who had merely gotten drunk. The court of inquiry lasted for months. In the end, 19 cadets were court-martialed. They were charged with mutiny and conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman. Interestingly, Jefferson Davis was called as a witness. Because he had obeyed Captain Hitchcock's order to return to his room before the violence started, he was not charged. He testified but claimed he was too drunk to remember much, protecting his friends where he could. He managed to graduate the following year, going on to a career that would tear the nation apart decades later. The 19 ringleaders were expelled. Among them were sons of judges and congressmen. The scandal reached all the way to President John Quincy Adams, who reviewed the sentences. He upheld the expulsions, sending a clear message. West Point was a place of discipline, not debauchery. The Eggnog Riot of 1826 marked the end of an era for West Point. Superintendent Thayer used the event to enforce even stricter regulations. The tradition of Christmas eggnog was banned forever. The North Barracks, the site of the mutiny, was eventually torn down, though not because of the riot itself. Today, West Point is a model of military decorum. But if you walk the grounds in the dead of winter, looking out over the frozen Hudson River, it's worth remembering that night in 1826. It serves as a humanizing reminder that even the most disciplined figures in history were once young, foolish, and capable of taking a party way too far. The Eggnog Riot remains a cautionary tale of what happens when you mix high stress, strict rules, and a few gallons of high-proof whiskey. Thank you for watching this episode of Hidden History. If you enjoyed this story of holiday chaos, please like and subscribe for more tales from the archives.